So, in sidereal astrology, the nodes, the North and South node, known as Rahu and Ketu in Vedic astrology, have moved signs or are about to move signs, just depending on the measurement that you use. Now, I use a true node measurement, which essentially takes the wobble, if we're getting technical, the wobble out of the nodes. And so, according to that measurement, the North Node will enter Aquarius on the 30th of May, and the South Node will enter Leo. Now, regardless of the measurement you use, you might have heard other astrologers that follow a sidereal or Vedic methodology that spoke about the nodes moving last week. We will definitely be able to feel it this coming week or from the 30th. And even more so, because they're shadow planets, they really only show up in their full power when we have an eclipse. And so my sense is we're really not going to know what their full force or really what their trajectory is about until we have our first eclipse season with them in September. So pay attention to the month of September as we're really going to get a sense in the collective energy what is going on with the North and South Node changing signs. Now, this can be a little bit confusing, right? If you follow Western astrology, we would have spoken about the North and South Node moving into Virgo and Pisces, I'm pretty sure, in January. And so it can be a little bit like, what the? The thing is, both methodologies are correct. They just go about looking at the cosmos in different ways. I'll put a link below to my video on sidereal astrology, which explains the difference between it and the more popular, I would say, Western astrology. So in this video, we're going to be going into the movement of the North and South Node into Aquarius and Leo from a sidereal astrology perspective. Now, for those of you that are like, sidereal what? What are you talking about? Sidereal is a methodology that looks at the astronomically correct placement of the planet. So, or in this case, of these shadow planets. If we were to look up and if we could actually see the North and South nodes, because they're points in the sky, they're mathematical points, um, we would see them in these particular constellations moving backwards through them. Unlike Western astrology, which uses the equinoxes to base its change in signs off. If that made no sense to you, just don't worry. Just trust your intuition. That's always really important with astrology. So, the signs of Aquarius, I'm going to talk about what North and South Node is about in a second, but I want to just start like Leo and Aquarius. They're opposing signs and they represent an axis of energy to do with innovation, rebellion, revolution, as well as creativity, children, self expression, and the ego. And so, before we get into what that means, let's just talk about what the North and South Node are. Now, they've been called the head and tail of the dragon or the head and tail of the snake. And they are these points in a chart that are always opposite one another. And the North Node is the energy of almost like the consciousness we're evolving into, our destiny, you might call it, at a collective and an individual level. The South Node is really about what we have learnt in past lives, what soul mastery we have, as well as what karma we have. And so they're really important points of destiny in a chart. And when they move signs, not only does that affect us at an individual level, but it also affects the energy of the collective. And it starts to be these 2 points, particularly during eclipse seasons when they are most active and visible, because they're not visible at any other time. We start to get an idea of, as a society or as a collective, what ignorance are we working through? What are we, as well as like, where is the consciousness of the collective evolving into? And at the same time, what karma do we have to correct? Where do we need to seek forgiveness? Where do we need to balance maybe some of the past actions we've had as a collective, but also as an individual? And what, at a personal level, what past life gifts are waking up within you? We all have past life mastery. We often think of karma as like a slap on the wrist, and it's really not. Karma is just accumulated action, and the results of those actions get spread across lifetimes. Now, one of those accumulated actions, you could argue, is your soul mastery. You might have found that there's just some things you're really good at and you can't explain why. That will have to do with that past life mastery, with that ability to just know because it's something the soul has done previously. That can be really uncomfortable for the ego because the ego wants you to have a degree for it, or it wants to have proved that it's somehow intellectually learnt something. But definitely what happens with that soul mastery is it's got karma around it. We work through that karma, and there's kind of there's some kind of wisdom that comes online. And you might find it has to do with your career, but it doesn't always have to. It can be things like becoming a mother or a father or a parent. It can be singing. It can be dancing. It can be writing a book. And it's not, what I want to be really careful is like we want to remove north and south node and the idea of like soul purpose, which is the north node, and soul mastery, which is the south node. We want to kind of remove those things from capitalism. These have existed well before the industrial military complex that we live in. And it is not about making money from these things necessarily. It doesn't mean you can't. Um, but I think if we don't want to put that on them as a measure of success or a measure of like you've definitely accessed your past life mastery. It's not that. It's more just like that sense of flow. Like I know how to do this thing. I get so much joy from it, and it connects me to a part of me I didn't know before. And so the north node, where the south node is that energy of like familiarity, the north node is that energy of like, I haven't done this thing before. And what we often find with the north node at a personal level, it's like we get pushed into it. It's almost like you can't avoid it. Do you know that feeling? Like you can't avoid this specific circumstance, or you can't avoid this calling that life has for you. And what's really important again is that the idea of soul purpose or purpose has kind of been lifted and moved into this capitalist agenda, which is fine. It's the energy we live in, the collective energy and collective ignorance we live in. But what is really important to remember is you can be on purpose and it might look nothing like the success that the capitalist agenda has. It might simply just be immense peace, even though you're very uncomfortable in what the universe is calling for you to do. Now, in Vedic astrology, the north and south node are called the Chayagrahas, or the shadow planets. And that's because, like I mentioned earlier, we can't actually see them in the sky. It's not like pointing out Jupiter or Venus. We only see them during eclipse seasons. And that's when we really feel their effects. They're points of destiny. And for anyone that's been in an eclipse, and we've all been in eclipse season, they happen 2 to 3 times a year. And generally it's like this big wipe through of energy, like an immense amount of energy entering our lives. And almost the sense of like having to face karma, having to work through things very rapidly to clean up. And that's where these two come in. If we want to get technical, which I don't really want to do too much in this video, but we'll see what comes through. They're the points where the moon's ecliptic and the sun's ecliptic overlap. So they're these points because the moon and the sun have slightly different trajectories or orbits through the sky and around the sun. And so it's where those points meet. Now, the 2 points where they meet represent one of them. The northern point represents the north node and the southern represents the south node. And it's really interesting when we break it down because like the sun is the soul and the moon is the mind. And so these points are like representing places where we need to step into alignment, where we need to even like let something go, burn through some kind of karmic energy we've got hanging around us that's preventing us from fully knowing who we are. And eclipse seasons are a great way to bring it up. Now, like I said, K2 or the South Node will represent our past life karma, as well as past life gifts and mastery. The North Node or Rahu will represent our soul purpose, but it also represents the ignorance that keeps us in our incarnation. So just how like the South Node has that past life karma to it, the North Node's got this energy of like, what is the thing I'm attached to that keeps on playing out in my life, that actually, and across births, that keeps me in a state of being reborn in a human body? Because it's an ignorance where, like, and when I say ignorance, I always think of like ignorance is like that shadow energy of eclipse. It's like it veils the mind, it veils the self from fully knowing who it is. And so as the north and south node move into Aquarius is where the north node is moving, and Leo is where the south south node is moving, we can find that these are areas where we have to address that ignorance in Aquarius, the things that keep us attached, as well as awaken to more of our conscious evolution through that Aquarian energy. And the south, which I'm going to talk about in a second, and the south node sitting in Leo is saying, like, okay, well, this is where um, we need to work through, we need to balance some energy from a past life, as well as awaken to more of a soul, like soul gifts in this area. Now, what is Aquarius and Leo all about? They're an axis. They're the two signs opposite each other. Aquarius is like the sign of revolution, the sign of rebellion and innovation. And Leo is the opposite. In a way, like Leo is about passion, it's about self expression, creativity. Your individual expression on earth is really what Leo is about. Whereas Aquarius is like how you give to others. So this is an axis of expression. One is like an expression, Aquarius is like expressing yourself towards humanity, giving back to the world, expressing yourself as a part of the collective. And Leo is self-expression. So how I serve, and at its unhealed, it's how I serve me. Now, some things I'd be watching out for in your own chart is if you're having your north or south node return, which happens every 18 and a half years. So you can count that. It's like 18 and a half years, 36 years, and then just keep on adding 8.5, and you'll get 18 and a half, and you'll get when your nodal returns are. That will make, if you know that you're in your nodal returns, this will be particularly big for you. There'll be some kind of karmic energy that's wanting to be settled from the past 18 years and a new path that is opening up to you. It can be a very big year while the north and south node are in different signs, which I should say the north and south nodes spend about 18 months in each sign. So this particular move will happen from the 30th of May to the 6th of December 2026. So 30th of May 2025 to the 6th of December 2026. Now, the other thing to look at in a chart is if you have a lot of Aquarius or Leo placements, or equally Taurus or Scorpio, which square those signs. They're the fixed signs. This can be a particularly big period for you in terms of, yeah, like karmic energy, in terms of awakening to soul gifts, in terms of evolving your own consciousness, and a really period of time of like rapid personal development and growth. So just keep that in mind. And if you want to have a look at that specifically, you can always book a one-on-one reading with me. I love looking at stuff like this. If you're curious about where your south and north node are and you want more detail or about this particular transit, I'll put details below as well. So let's talk about what the north node in Aquarius means. And then we'll get to south node in Leo. So north node in Aquarius. I feel like this is really needed at a collective level at the moment. It's the sign of rebellion, of revolution. And at the heart of it is like this deep longing to break out of the current system and to fight for what you believe no longer works or serves at a collective level. Because this is really not about me, it's about us, is really Aquarius's calling. Even though Aquarius can be very individual, it's very much operating for like the highest good of a society. And you can find, like, at a collective level, that might mean, attending protests, really taking collective action for things that you see that are fundamentally wrong with government or institution or regulation or big business. I really do feel like part of this will be a lot of pressure on the idea of a billionaire and whether like a billionaire should even exist. I think there'll be a big focus on taxing the rich, and even I'm really hoping like a shift in dynamic from blaming immigration for issues in a particular country to actually seeing that like it's the oligarchy and or like billionaires and like the upper class that are creating issues for the middle and lower class. Uh, uh, I feel like there's a really big potential during this period of time for revolution, but there's a big watch out in that. So, one of the things that happens with Aquarius and at a collective, but I also will talk about this at a personal level, is that very often when we revolt against an existing system, we end up just creating the same thing we're revolting against. And it's kind of that idea of like, what resists persists. Or I love this quote, what you hate, you get to keep. And so, what's really important with the North Node in Aquarius, if you really want to work with that energy of revolution, like you really feel like system has to change, is you have to have love and compassion and understanding for where the existing system came from. Without love, compassion, and it doesn't mean acceptance of that system, it's very hard to change what's there because you'll simply recreate. It's coming from the same vibrational energy, the same thing. The universe will give you the same lesson again. And in your personal life, that might look like, things that maybe you've accepted as structurally normal, like needing to have a mortgage or marriage as an institution or needing to prove yourself through a certain line of work, which feels very empty. You can find that there's almost like a personal revolution that happens where it's like, none of this is working for me. I don't want to do this anymore. But again, we want to have compassion and peace and understanding for that old system in order to move into the new. The other thing that North Node in Aquarius really pushes is innovation and progression. Now, that can be progression in political views and systems, which is great, but it will also put a big focus, and also because Jupiter has moved into Gemini, which I'll put info on below, there'll be an even big focus on AI, innovations, and new technology, um, with a big focus on being able to find truth in information. At the same time, there can be a bit of a rebellion against that, if that makes sense, which often happens with technology. Like someone proposes or AI starts to become more ubiquitous, and then there's a big push against it. Now, because Rahu or the North Node, it's not just about where the collective is evolving into, it also deals with the ignorance that sits within the collective. We can find that although there's a lot of energy around revolution, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, there can also be a lot of like rebels without a cause. And in the process of hating a system, but not knowing what it is you want to replace it with, um, we can perpetuate the same system into existence. And so this is one of the big watch outs we've got as a collective and also personally at this time. There can also be a lot of disillusionment that happens while the North Node is in Aquarius, where there can be a lot of apathy, like, how do I even do this? How do I even change this? Um, and at the same time, that disillusionment around like always needing an enemy to fight. Like, what if we were just creating change because it's for the highest good, because we want to awaken to greater acceptance and love, and it wasn't about punishing someone or hurting someone else or coming from revenge? So, we really want to be careful with that. Now, this North Node or Rahu also deals with addiction, and attachment that happens at a collective level. And with this in mind, and Aquarius ruling technology, I think we can pretty much guarantee there's going to be a really big focus on like addiction to technology. It's already there in the culture, but it feels like that will ramp up another level. And even the idea of like, does it move from AA to actually like the idea that it's not just Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous, there's also like an addiction to technology that has to be addressed, like an over reliance on that, that's not healthy for certain individuals. Um, what I would note As I wrap up just talking about the North Node in Aquarius, is the North Node tends to be stronger than the South Node. So you'll probably feel that energy more so than you will feel the South Node energy. The South Node energy is more internal, whereas that North Node energy, that kind of revolution, technology, addiction to technology, but also technology to create revolution will be really big. I feel like at a pop culture level, at a collective level, in protests. But when we get to the South Node in Leo, this will be something you feel more internally. So let's talk about the South Node in Leo now. Leo is more individual than Aquarius, and it deals with children, creativity. It does deal with leadership, which Aquarius also does, but it also deals with spirituality and how we express ourselves, particularly how we express ourselves when we are not under pressure to fit in. We can find, because K2 or the South Node deals with past life mastery and karma and spirituality. You might find, particularly if you're in your nodal returns, it's that 18.5 year cycle, you might find that actually some really big energy switches on within you around your creativity, your desire to have children or to adopt, the need to dance, to sing, to be more creative, to even be on stage or to express yourself. Like even just internally, like I just want to be more free in how I express myself. And that might be like what you wear, how you present yourself, just it's just a greater authenticity around how you are. You can also find that even though the South Node has less to do with like that external big energy, you will still find that in the culture, there's a really big focus on play that comes about. And it might be as a reaction to that like technology addiction that it becomes like, yeah, play, enjoyment, and even like how art is a part of important part of the human experience. Well, important to note as well, the South Node or K2 is associated with the body. And so we can find this is a period where the culture gets really interested in like somatic expression, physical expression, or even art that uses the body. Like this would be a great time if you've always wanted to go back and dance or sing or just go and like move in a really creative way. You can find that like there's a deep inner calling to do that, or even that it's something that pops up at your gym or in your local community. This idea of like a more playful way instead of like hopping on a running machine and like pounding out miles. This can be a time, or kilometers. This can be a time where it's like, hey, like, but exercise should be fun and moving the body should be playful. So just notice that if you feel that within you, it can be a really great time for it to be expressed. It can also be that like spirituality and transcendent is more about the body as opposed to the mind, and kind of a really big push away from bypassing to being in the body in order to understand the divine. Because Leo deals with children very often, I also feel like there's going to be a big focus within and in the collective around children. So, the wisdom that children naturally have, and even all of us trying to reconnect to that inner child, try to reconnect to that place of innocence. And that might manifest in the culture as a child, like kind of big focus on the child as a genius or the child as like some kind of spiritual guru. It can even be as adults, this focus on creativity to put us back in contact with our inner child. I feel like as well, it's already there in the culture, but it will be there as well, is the focus on children involved in wars and conflicts. We've already seen that with like the initial movement of the North and South Node into these different signs, the focus on starvation in the Middle East and Gaza and the genocide that's happening there. And we can find that that becomes a bigger and bigger focus. Like it's about the children with the South Node in Leo. And it's really about our responsibility as a collective to the children of this world. Um, that said, as well, it feels like there will be a big focus as well on just childhood well-being, like caring for how kids are growing up in society, particularly with the exposure to technology, which is that North Node in Aquarius. Now, this can feel really, really big, like I said, if you've got Leo placements, any of the planets, or Aquarius, Taurus, or Scorpio energy. Personally, I would be feeling, and if you want to work with this energy, there will be a really big focus on play, on balancing life with being. Even exploring what you're passionate about. I feel like within this as well, there can be a bit of a reaction to AI or to technology that was adopted a little bit too rapidly at the expense of humanity, at the expense of, say, like employees or people that were working in the business, in a business. It's a really great time to explore your own creative talent, to realize you are creative by nature, and allow that to unfold within you. It's not about making money from that. It's not about making other people happy or proving that you could do anything. It's simply being creative. Now, a couple of predictions. So, the last time the North and South Node were in Aquarius and Leo was 2006 to 2007. If we want to get accurate, 13th of October 2006 to 1st of May 2008. So, one thing you can do is think back to that time, like what was going on for you? Um, was there some big calling or cause that you were called to support? Was there a way in which you were thinking about technology or just wanting to totally revolt and go against what people were telling you what to do? You can find that that comes out up again for you now. And then at the same time, you might have found that that was a time maybe when you started working with your inner child or were thinking about creativity and play and finding greater balance in life. It will be strong again now. It's really interesting because collectively, that period between October 2006 and May 2008, 7, no, 2008, sorry, to 2008. It was actually a really big period for the establishment of social media. So during this time was when we had Facebook and Twitter open up to the public. Apple introduced the iPhone and Google acquired YouTube. So we know collectively this is always a really big time for technology. Can be a great time to just watch. If you're in the tech space, it can be a really interesting time of acquisitions, of tech players, of new companies opening, that address this kind of like element of play, which is kind of what, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube have done, that like before before all the censoring, um, between play, um, creativity and the ability to like express your own creativity on a larger platform. It's also interesting as well because the development of this social media fueled a lot of the start of what became the Arab Spring, which wasn't until later. But for instance, social media was used to organize protests in Egypt, all done through like Facebook and Twitter. And Twitter obviously became this dominant platform for reform or for protest and revolution that was happening in the Middle East. I think we will see more of that, but the technology will be of a different flavor. So think AI or new tech that comes into the landscape. When will you feel this? So you might not be feeling it yet. You might just have like inklings of what's going on. Keep your eyes open for these dates. September 7th to the 21st this year, we're going to have our first eclipse season with the nodes in these new signs. Then February the 17th to the 3rd of March 2026. And finally, August the 12th to the 28th, 2026. So we've got 3 big pushes that will happen from these nodal energies. So if you're not really feeling anything yet, you will. And I'll quickly mention when we get to those periods of time, I run a specific ritual and reading, which is just for the eclipse season. So you can get a reading based on exactly where those nodes are in your chart to help you not work with the eclipse because you can't really work with it, but to help you know what to expect and have a bit of a heads up of what's going to go on. So enjoy the change in this, in the nodes, um, and what it brings for you. And if you want to learn more, feel free book a one-on-one reading or work with me during any of the eclipse seasons.